Less than 1 week away from the start of NFL season, which means it's down to crunch time in our best ball drafts. So I'm bringing on good friend Pat Kerrane. We're going to talk through our exposures, our plan of attack for the rest of our best ball drafts. Maybe the guys we drafted a little bit too much, Koff, Rojo, Will Fuller, Koff, and maybe some guys that we want to target that we haven't been drafting as much for the rest of the year. Our plan of attack for exposures and a quick look at all the fun we've had this offseason. All right, Pat. 1 week away from NFL season. Drafted probably way too many best ball, and I know you're deep in the main event streets and everything. How are we feeling heading into this last week?
I'm feeling okay. I mean, it feels like it's tough to even kind of get a handle on where I'm at. So I'm actually kind of psyched to be doing this just to help think through like what I need to do to target. Because I've got about 20 little. I think I have 19 best ball manias left to do, and I want to fire some more DraftKings. I got a little exhausted on DraftKings. I had to come back do some best ball manias, but building up. I'm taking the weekend off, going away for the weekend, and then coming back the last few days. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, gonna just fire off a ton of drafts, and hopefully I'll be energized for DraftKings. And I guess the puppy's coming out, so just trying to get a better sense of like what I need to prioritize.
Yeah, I've been kind of doing the same thing. This week, I had planned on drafting a whole shitload of teams, and life sometimes gets in the way. So that's what I've been thinking about too. I have like 40 BBMs still to do. I do have a lot of DraftKings done, so I don't feel super pressured in DraftKings. And it's also nice, like you said, there is going to be the Puppy 4 on Monday. DraftKings is launching some new tournaments, so I think we can be a little bit flexible as opposed to years past where it was like you had like 2 or 3 total tournaments to draft into. So I guess that's nice and a little awkward at times because we don't even really know what to expect. I don't know how big the Puppy 4 is going to be. I don't know when it's going to fill, but let's talk a little bit.
It'll fill probably on Tuesday, so you can.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's going to be $1 million tournament that fills in for $5 that fills in 24 hours. If these other tournaments are any indication of what's going on. Do you find it really quick? Do you find it crazy that also DraftKings is going to fill their $5 Millie Maker with like 900,000 entries? That's insane.
It is insane. I haven't even really fired at that. I know you have, and you kind of talked me into firing a little bit at it. Just because like the price point versus the upside is so nice, but yeah, I've been doing mostly stuff like the $20 and the $25, which has a smaller week 17, which appeals to me. And I also feel like, okay, if I'm going over to DraftKings, let me get a different flavor, not just the PPR, but also like how I'm kind of building. So,
yep.
But yeah, the fact that long way of saying like the fact that they're filling their $5 tournament, and I feel like that's not even the tournaments that like everyone is firing at. Like the hardcore best ball people are not all firing at that, so it is pretty wild.
And they filled. I mean, some of these are small. A bunch of single entries ranging from $5 to $200. They filled one $4 20 max already. That was like at least a few 100,000 total prize pool. It was a big tournament, and then they got another one, and so. I don't know, man. The people still love drafting on DraftKings, even though I agree. It comes and goes for me. I need breaks from DraftKings because it is a little bit more of a tough experience compared to Underdog. But I think that'll be the thing for me. I'm really going to try to hammer these. We're talking strategy of what we want to do in this final week. I think I'm going to try to hammer out Best Ball Mania about as quickly as I can, generally speaking. Some people... Here's a conspiracy theory some people have pitched that when we get these like puppies and Pomeranians and stuff, people will say to draft in Best Ball Mania during that time because maybe you're getting some new users and some spillover and people going in there. I don't know if that's true or not, but maybe I'll test that out on Monday.
I've done that. I don't think it necessarily works. I think it can work and it cannot work because there's two things going on. I think you've got, right, my theory's been I don't want to draft against like Ship Chasing Nation. And if they're in the puppy, then I'll happily go over to BBM, or I'll go to DraftKings. I've also just gone over to DraftKings during
100%.
puppy season. But the other thing is that I think there's other people that think like me, that are basically like, I rather just draft BBM. Everyone's in the puppy. I'll go to BBM. So I feel like we should get some stats on this, but I feel like there's a fair amount of badges in some of those drafts as well. So it's not like you're avoiding everybody.
Yeah, that's a good point. And fingers crossed, knock on wood or whatever. I've not been having very many badges in my best ball Mania drafts of late, and so
when are you
it has felt
drafting?
really refreshing, all over the place, absolutely all over the place.
Okay.
Whenever I was telling Pat before the show, it has been a week from hell basically, and some other stuff I've been doing outside of work. So when I get so triggered at all of that, I'm just like, fuck it, I'm hopping into a Best Ball Mania draft and like turning my brain off from all this other stuff. And I've seen like 1 or 2 badges at any point in time. And so it has been refreshing from same thing as you when you're like streaming drafts all the time. Obviously you guys have ship chasing. We have a similar crossover in terms of like cohort of people that are hopping in the drafts with us.
For
like
sure.
if I stream a Best Ball Mania team or whatever. And so I've been sneaking around, recording some drafts off air. Rob and I did that. Pete and I did that. We're trying to avoid everybody that's listening to this show.
Yeah, we might have to start doing that with the main event on ship chasing, because we're literally like, it's a full on streamer draft, except we're doing like a $2,000 high stakes draft.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's kind of like. It's the opposite. It's if you guys streamed like one of the Mastiffs, right? What is it, $2,500 entry or whatever on Underdog? Like ETR and some other people are streaming it, or Underdog's breaking it down, Josh and Hayden and stuff. But like people don't rush to jump and get Leonard Fournette and James Conner and some of the guys that the normal person drafts,
right.
The crazy sickos that all of us just don't even like. Ben, you get Ben on there talking about DJ Moore at the 2-3 turn, and that's somebody that goes in the early 4th round. So very different worlds. I pulled up. Figure we can start with Best Ball Mania since we've kind of been, talking about that, and because I have more drafts left to kind of tweak these exposures, right? I can just show super quickly. I'll go over to just general exposure and my players, right? From a kind of top 10 or whatever. Gabe Davis, Darrell Henderson, MVS, Kyle Pitts, Michael Carter, Isaiah McKenzie, Dernis Johnson, Marquise Brown, Kenny Gainwell. Obviously, you can kind of see where my general strategy is. It's all late round running backs and a couple of kind of my favorite, spike week type, no pun intended, wide receivers in Gabe Davis, MVS, McKenzie, very high on the Bills, obviously, but lots of focus on the 0 RB type running backs and kind of these spike week-esque wide receivers with a focus on the, kind of elite offenses. Nothing has truly changed too much for me at the top here. I guess Isaiah McKenzie is a guy who I probably won't be getting much more of. I was hammering him, in the 17th, 18th round. And then D'Ernest being kind of an 18th round guy. I've been cycling through some other guys because he was just my guy. I know you talked about this last year, having a late round flavor of the week running back. Well, D'Ernest was a flavor of like 2 months. And so
he was the flavor of the summer.
Yeah, exactly. So I've been, this was higher on D'Ernest for me, and I just haven't been taking him of late, but I'm really not trying to get more Gabe Davis, but it just kind of keeps happening. Darrell Henderson, same way. He just is in a range that I keep kind of taking, and so I don't have any super strong takeaways from the guys that I want to move up and down on in my top exposures. Do you have anything kind of similar? I'm scared to see the Rojo and Will Fuller bags.
They're pretty packed for sure. But I don't know. There's a stand here. I don't know if you'll know maybe you will, but I've taken a mega stand, and it's not on one of those guys. But yeah. So with the Gabe Davis stuff, that is really interesting to me because I, like you, I mean, I was kind of waiting for him to kind of get to a point where it wasn't appealing. Yeah. And I've seen him like in a mock draft we did. Denny took him in the 3rd round, and in the last main event draft we did. a really sharp drafter took him in the third round. Took him in like the early third round. I think he was out of the 3. So I think he went 303. And at that price, you gotta really think about it. I'm probably passing pretty much every time at that price. But to get him at the 3-4 turn, early 4th, still feels really good to me. And I'm hearing from Gretsch is kind of talking about, I don't know. I'm starting to feel maybe more like the way to play the Bills is Davis in the 4th than Diggs in the 1st. And it sounds like Sean is kind of leaning that way too. So the kind of like Team Diggs is starting to come over to Team Gabe. So it's like, all right, well, how am I not going to be drafting Gabe Davis now? Especially because his price hasn't really risen. I mean, it rose a ton, and then it just stopped. It stopped kind of in the 4th. Maybe it's crept up a little bit, but it's not in the 3rd.
What do you think about that generally? He's a great example of that, where we got the guys like him that went from, I don't know, whatever, opening the year in the 5th, 6th, 7th round. I remember one of the first teams I drafted on day 1. It was like Cortland Sutton in like the 80s or something like that, but that stuff happens for like 3 days. That was very, very early on, and then we get the fairly quick rise. We got it on Gabe, Trey Lance eventually after he kind of stagnated, right?
He's coming back down.
I know. Well, he's back to being a backup quarterback, so he should fall. But we've kind of hit this point where we've had so many drafts. There's no new information now that we're past the preseason. That are you willing to kind of just take that, right? Like, I agree with you on Gabe. Like at the 3-4 turn, it's like I don't like McLaurin over him. You put him in a bucket with DJ Moore and JuJu and Hollywood and those guys in that range. It's like, I mean, I like all of them fine, but I don't know why he's worse than any of those guys in that tier. And so I'm not really backing off. I mean, obviously I have a huge stand on him, so I'm fine if I want to start playing around with those other guys there. But everybody's kind of like locked in, is what I'm saying, and generally into like a bucket of ADP. We even saw Kyle Pitts, right, who was another one of my big stands, shoot up after the 50-yard bomb, and now he's kind of settled back in again, like early 3rd round. And so are you willing to kind of continue to take some stands? I know you said you have one big stand, since we're fairly locked into ADP now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to take stands. Like I think it's been kind of nice this year to have, multiple best ball tournaments that I'm firing at, and then also with the high stakes stuff, the way it's worked out is some of the players that we're on in a fairly big way are different than the players I'm on in best ball, because I'm co-managing those teams. So that's like one of the things that really is helpful, I think, to have some co-managers. Gets you off some stands, kind of helps you break ties in ways that you probably wouldn't otherwise. One of those examples would be JuJu, who, like, I'm underweight JuJu in Best Ball Mania. I think his floor is pretty low. He's been terrible for 3 seasons, and I know he's been struggling through injuries and stuff, but, like, we don't generally just, like, write off 3 seasons for a player, like, ever. And, like, because he's with Patrick Mahomes, we just decided that we will, which I get. And we're overweight him in high stakes. And that's exactly how I want to play it. Like, I'm like really psyched about that, because if we miss on, a 5th round pick in the main event, that's not necessarily going to sink our team. You can replace that player very easily. We're going to be on the waiver wire. We got to pick our starters. Like, having a dead roster spot from the 5th round is not that big a deal. And not that I think JuJu will be like dead, but I do think that he could be like not that good this year, because he has been not that good for 2 years and horrific last year. So, it's like one of those things where it's like kind of floor ceiling stuff where, like, I'm comfortable taking a big stand against a guy, and then maybe I'll get some exposure elsewhere. Or, like, there's guys that I'm like, man, I wish I had more of this guy in best ball, but I'll probably just end up playing him week 1 on DFS because I kind of like his early season profile, and that's how I'll kind of take it. So thinking through this best ball stuff more is like, this is one slate. And I'm gonna take some stands, and I'm gonna be wrong, and I'm gonna play this like I would week 14 in some ways, and on DraftKings and DFS. And if if I just whiff on something, I think that's okay.
I love, and we've talked about this a little bit. I think I definitely don't have all the answers in terms of how you should play it, but I think your perspective is perfectly spot on. That people think fantasy football is fantasy football, right? And in reality, there's a boatload of different fantasy football games and best ball with these tournaments, right? And then people also just view best ball. They're like, oh, it's just fantasy football, but I don't have to pick a starting lineup, right? But when you implement this tournament, right, we're looking at Best Ball Mania here. That's just for even numbers. There's 500,000 people that are 500,000 teams that are getting drafted into this. And, more than half the prize pool goes out to the regular season champion and the top 5 or whatever it is, the top 10 of the entire tournament. It's like 55 or 60% of the prize pool. It's like 10 people take all the money from this thing out of 500,000. And we're drafting from May to, there's so many variables that I love. The JuJu one is such a good reference where in best ball, there are these other guys around him who I think have, we were just talking about DJ Moore or whatever. I think him and JuJu and Gabe are actually like a little bit similar where I prefer Gabe because not that JuJu's old. He's actually quite young. But Gabe is this ascending profile that I want to be on. I could see him as a first round. Like, what if he's just the man in Buffalo? He's the first round pick next year. JuJu,
he's not coming off the field. He's their best blocker. Like he's playing. I know it took a while, but it seems like if he's healthy, I think he's out there basically every snap.
And so I want to make that bet in best ball, but also because, like you said, he's going to be out there every time. We saw if you just get Gabe of last year, he's going to score touchdowns and he's going to have some spikes, right? He's kind of this small loss, big win type player to me, in my opinion. I know some people disagree, but that's kind of my take. Like, I don't see a way in which Gabe Davis is out there playing for the Bills, not scoring some touchdowns and having some good games. Is he the smash in the 4th round? I don't know. Probably not. The odds are against everybody. JuJu, like that's what people will say. Like, aren't you the Leone? Aren't you worried about this, that, and the other thing? I'm like, yes, I'm worried about everyone, but I can't draft everybody. I have to try something to win this tournament. It's like, what are the odds? Like, I wasn't drafting Julio. In hindsight, I'm probably an idiot that I wasn't taking 18th round Julio. But it's like, look.
Hey man, I was drafting a bunch of 18th round Julio, and honestly, I'm not even sure it helped that much. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Like, but I'm not like doing cartwheels over like, now you're taking him in the 10th. Like, I've locked this thing up.
I know, it's a good comparison. Last year, remember the Darrell Henderson thing? Like, I was smashing the shit out of Darrell Henderson, and then I did feel like, yes, I got one. I won something there, and obviously, and that didn't matter. But that's the perfect example. It's like the odds of Julio being the guy you need, where I'm not going to make any money if I don't have Julio fucking Jones, are so low that it's like let's just move on and not worry about it. But the JuJu thing is such a great example. Like I said, I don't see a scenario in which Gabe or even like DJ Moore. DJ Moore's floor is so high. He's playing with Cam Newton and he's usable in fantasy. JuJu could like you said, just be dust, like stone dust. He could be the 4th wide receiver for all we know. That's a low probability thing. But who is to say Sky Moore isn't better than him? MVS is just going to be MVS, in my opinion. And maybe Hardman is a little bit better. Again, I'm not expecting it.
Think about it from not just like week 1, he's going to lead them in targets among the wide receivers. Kelsey will probably lead them in targets, but but that's week 1. It's like the easiest time to find weeks for your best ball teams, and by the time we do get to the best ball playoffs, that's when I'm worried. So when I'm talking about like, am I going to have a hole in my lineup? That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the end of the season with Sky Moore's coming on, and maybe. JuJu's already been dealing with like a knee thing. They changed his contract to give him more of a per game bonus. Like, the fact that he struggled through injuries for the last 3 years is also like, again, not ideal. We don't generally do this. Like when someone else struggles with injuries for 3 years, we're like, I don't know, are they going to stay healthy? With him, it's like, well, that means we should write off everything he's done. So it just seems like maybe the floor isn't being fully accounted for here.
But he's such a good example of of a lot of things, just generally from best ball, but also like this weird game of fantasy football where, like you said, in a managed redraft league, take your swing on 5th round JuJu or 4th round JuJu or whatever
Yeah.
whatever his cost is, because like you said, I'm drafting a bunch more and I get to pick who to start. And if I miss, but if I hit right, like last year, if you missed on your 4th round pick, but you drafted Cooper Kupp in the 3rd and Jamar Chase in the 5th, who gives a shit? Because you're starting those guys and you smashed. You know what I mean?
We had a team. Our best team last year was just the NFC team that we drafted with Leone. We got Taylor, Kelsey, AJ Brown, Jamar Chase, Deebo Samuel, and DeAndre Swift. And like that's it. You don't need. Then we missed on a bunch of. We think we have Burrow quarterback, and we missed it on like everyone else. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Like you get enough hits. I mean, that was like we could have thrown back one of those hits and still been fine. Like you just get, 4 hits on your team or whatever and managed, and you're golden.
But in best ball, in these tournaments, again, I do want to touch on what you mentioned, like with the DraftKings stuff, because I agree, and I think that there are some interesting ways to play the smaller field stuff, like the smaller field finals, as opposed to these tournaments. But referencing, like we're looking at, my BBM stuff here, you don't need to hit on everything, right? But you need, like, in order to navigate the whole season and navigate those playoff weeks, you do need like a lot of firepower. And because you're gonna miss, you're not gonna hit on all the 18 guys or 20 guys. But once you start compounding that, right, you should miss a lot of late round guys. But the higher you move up your draft slot that become misses, the much harder it is to navigate all those playoff weeks. And like we talk about the best team that I had last year that I drafted with Pete Overzet from that Pat does ship chasing with, and we actually didn't have any of the smashes, but we just had enough decent guys. And it all kind of came together that we were able to navigate the season. There's teams that drafted way better teams than we did. I mean, we took CeeDee Lamb and Keenan Allen, and Raheem Mostert was our first running back. He got hurt in the first play of the season. We were, we didn't draft some monster team, but when you have kind of enough firepower and enough decent players, that's like, again, the Gabe JuJu thing. It's like if JuJu misses, he misses in a way that he's Allen Robinson of last year. He's not giving you anything. When Gabe misses, it's like, but he's still going to score like 8 touchdowns because that's just by being on the field for the Bills. And so I think thinking about those players, and that's why, like, you see like my exposures like this. That's kind of generally how I view it. It's like MVS. I don't do as many managed leagues as you do. I don't think I'll ever draft MVS. I wouldn't draft him in the main event.
Yeah,
like
I've actually thought about drafting him in the main event, and then I was like, wait, what am I doing? Like he's a one-trick pony.
Yeah. And when are you ever going to know when to start him? But again, in best ball is like, I don't know. I just don't see a way I lose on MVS. I may not win, but I don't see a way I lose. So thinking through those differences, I think, is important.
Let's talk about AJ Brown, because this is gonna. Now I'm gonna have to walk back everything I said about risk management, because AJ Brown is my 3rd highest owned receiver. I have 3 guys kind of all right together. AJ Brown I have at 25%.
Okay. And
obviously, I think he could miss in a way that really does hurt you from that ADP. So I'm like kind of going against what I just said about JuJu here. But I guess what I see with AJ Brown is like, especially I just had the walkthrough come out today, and just like writing about how good AJ Brown has been and how run heavy the Texans have been. It's like pretty crazy that this guy who's, I mean, I don't know, like if he was on the Chiefs, let's say he had gone to the Chiefs.
Oh my God.
Would we take him over Chase?
He's right there, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the argument. It's like, no, I prefer Chase. But I think he's right there. So, like, talent-wise, it's just situation. It's just the unknown of the situation. But there's a chance that this team actually is pretty pass-heavy to begin the season. They were last year, so it's possible. Yep.
So when you come out in the preseason and the first 8 plays with the first team offense is 8 passes, Jalen Hurts threw it 8 times, and that they never ran the ball. Everybody's and nobody really did anything with that information. We overanalyzed the preseason a lot, but nobody was like, this is probably pretty good for AJ Brown and Dallas Goedert and Devonta Smith.
And like, I know that the narrative stuff is a bit, but like, they are literally best friends. Like that should help. Like, it can't hurt. Like, I'm not like not bumping him up my board for that, but it's definitely like it does make you feel a little cozier with the pick. But yeah, I mean, when you're getting a guy that you just like, there's no question marks about his talent, and talk about a guy who's played through injuries. You know, AJ Brown's been banged up the last few seasons, but he's been insanely good whenever he's been on the field. He's good deep. He's good after the catch. Like, I just think he's gonna be a perfect fit for, you know, if the Eagles are trying to figure out a way to kind of push their offense back towards the pass, he is a perfect fit for helping them do that. So that's a scenario where I am just taking a big old stand on the upside. And I guess the floor element is that I just feel so confident that he's talented. Yeah. But I do think the situation, the floor in the situation is pretty low. So in that sense, maybe I'm not practicing what I preached on JuJu.
I wonder if I think that's the general consensus, is that situation is what creates the maybe floor issues, and that's what. So I think people would view it that JuJu has a high floor because he's on the Chiefs.
Because he's on the Chiefs, yeah.
And AJ Brown has a lower floor because he's a little bit more expensive. But I mean, it's like a round. It's not that big of a deal, at least on Underdog. But if you're that talented, and the Eagles, the only thing people are talking about with the Eagles being a situational concern is just pass rate. They have the best offensive line in football. Jalen Hurts, I'm not like some big Jalen Hurts stan, but he's good enough to make somebody good in fantasy, I think.
Yeah.
And the weapons around him are awesome, which people also will use against guys in terms of floor. But like, don't we want really good offenses? You know, it's like we don't draft Brandon Cooks in the second round because he has no target competition if the offense stinks, right? So I think we use some of those things against guys like AJ Brown, and I'm not sure that I'm that worried about his floor, but I do guess that the pass rate does make the floor a little bit scary, but he's dealt with that in the past, like you mentioned.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like he's coming from the worst case scenario. Like, what you're worried that Eagles might be is literally where he's been. Yeah. So like it's all upside from that perspective. And then yeah, it would be a prop. Like, okay, let's think about it like this: what if Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith were traded to the Titans? Where would we be drafting AJ Brown? And we probably would be drafting. We'd probably be drafting him a little bit lower than we're drafting him now, because there'd be no. I mean, maybe we talk ourselves into the Titans. Hey, they traded for these two guys; they're going to pass more. But it'd probably be like, well, it's still the Titans. They're going to run the crap out of the ball. So, you know, I think the target competition does matter, especially if we know for a fact that it's going to be a low volume offense. But the out you have is it's not. And if there's good target competition, but it's also just a super explosive offense, which it frankly should be. Then I don't know. I just have a hard time.
I can't figure out a path, and nobody's ever really, other than Jalen Hurts sucks. Which if Jalen Hurts was that
plausible,
bad, but like they made the playoffs last year and they scored some points last year without AJ Brown, and so I just struggle to find a path where the Eagles are like totally tanking any of these guys, really. Like because even Minshew's the backup. If Jalen Hurts sucks that bad, Gardner Minshew can keep AJ Brown afloat.
Yeah, plus they just traded for, or they claimed Ian Book. There's they have an elite offensive line as well.
We need I know to start.
I had to mark Ian Book as I think we even blurbed him. I think they made us blurb him. So that's why. So you guys need to know that the Ian Book is now on the Eagles, because I had to know that.
That is great. But I'm loving the AJ Brown points, and that's pointing me to something I wanted to touch on a little bit too. Is when we can't cover every base in terms of figuring out who we want to target and stuff. And even if you could, you're in a draft room, somebody else might take them or whatever. But figuring out, I have my AJ Brown exposure up on the screen. I have 16% AJ Brown. 50% of those teams are 0 running back teams, which I'm totally cool with. It's like all elite quarterback teams, but you do see a lot of Isaiah McKenzie on those teams, a lot of Melvin Gordon on those teams, Dearness, who we mentioned, a lot of Isaiah Spiller. And so I am interested in getting some more AJ Brown, but then I want to be like, okay, I'm fine doing AJ Brown 0 running back teams, but like all these guys I have with AJ Brown, almost all of them are in much worse outlooks than before. Dearness, nothing has happened. Spiller is probably just stone dust.
I think he's done, yeah.
Noah Fan is not looking particularly great. I mean, 31% Jamal Williams. What the fuck are we even doing?
How did that happen?
The Patriots, yeah, but I didn't know any of this, right? The Patriots don't look very good. It's kind of worrisome, and so figuring out those kinds of guys, and then figuring out how I want to apply the AJ Brown teams moving forward is like, okay, we're not doing Isaiah Spiller anymore, we're not doing Dearness, so let's find some other guys to get with those last AJ Brown teams.
Yeah, I actually want to check mine out. Here, let me try to pull up my exposures here. Let me share my screen. Yeah, so
okay.
Is this sharing?
Yep, you're up.
Okay. All right. So there's the stand I was talking about.
Oh, I should have known. I should have known that
You
one.
should have.
I should have known that one. Okay, so here's the $1 million question then. Literally $1 million question. $2 million question. Are you just going to keep drafting it? Are you where are you comfortable taking him in these last handful of drafts that you have?
So what I've done, and this is what I've generally done with kind of every player that I've taken a stand on, is once I get to a certain point, I just start wanting ADP values, and he's actually falling a little bit. So now I'm saying, okay, let me get him in the end of the 11th, and I've been in the 11th, and I've pushed him around the turn because there's another guy I wanted. So I was like, I'm going to push Rachaad White around. He came back, so I got him in the 12th. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make myself get that value, because there was a time where I was just like, the 10th round is for Rachaad White. That is what it is for. There's no other purpose of the 10th round. Just hammer Rachaad White. So that's kind of how I got him there. But yeah, now I'm like, well, maybe the 11th round is for Rachaad White, or the 12th, depending on the draft. So I'm kind of easing back a little bit. But yeah, especially if I'm on the back half of the board these days, there was a time where at the 10:03, I was like, I'm just going to take White. He's not coming back. But now I'll see if he does come back.
I like that. I think that's a really sensical approach. People ask that all the time, right? We have, and we'll have it again next year, the silly take a stand versus diversification conversations and all of that. I think in reality, it's more of what you're outlining is like, I do want to target this player. Everybody has that. Everybody has somebody that they like, or certain cohort of guys that they prefer, drafting. And once you reach a certain level of exposure, everybody has, a different number that they feel comfortable with or not comfortable with. But from then on, it's like, okay, I don't need to avoid. If this guy is the best pick, I don't need to just avoid him because I have 40% of him. But I can push the limits a little bit, like you said, on now let's maybe maximize those teams as opposed to I was just taking him. I would Tony Felix Castro is his name. He won the DraftKings Millie last year. He posted his BBM exposures, and he had it was literally 80 or 85% Nico Collins, and it was like he drafted him in every draft, and he didn't really care about ADP. And then obviously Nico shot way up, and it worked. It worked for him. So he probably would have had more, but Nico shot way up, and so he didn't have to press it as much anymore. Just doing little things like that, I think, is the real conversation around diversification and all that, as opposed to you can't draft more than 20% of any player. That's silly.
Well, I also think check in. I checked in on Rachaad White probably in June. I checked in with myself. And I was specifically thinking about how I'm approaching these kind of double-digit round targets. And at that point, I had too much Rojo, even for me, even at the time when I thought he was going to have a role. Before he was a healthy scratch. So, I was like, this is ridiculous. So, and I was like, and what is it costing me? And I was like, it's costing me Rachaad White, who I'm super excited about. So that's I made a pivot specifically to target more White. And then I kind of checked in again and was like, I think this is one of the best plays on the entire board from a cost perspective, he has a massive ceiling week type of situation, doing the analysis that I did looking for, the guys who can kind of win you weeks. He definitely profiles as a guy who can just absolutely win you some weeks, and particularly at the end of the season. As we know, Jack Miller did some research that rookies do come on at the end of the season, which we think intuitively, but it does happen. So, he's just like, and frankly, he's just such a good prospect that I feel like maybe that's a little bit underrated because he did fall to the third round, and there was some worries that he wouldn't, maybe even get drafted. But his prospect profile to me is like better than James Cook's. I think it's from like a PPR perspective. I kind of like it better than Kenneth Walker's, just because Walker doesn't catch passes. Yep. So I'm very excited about Rachaad White and kind of happy to have that stand. It's like that makes me feel good that I have that stand, but I don't want to take a bunch of stands like that personally.
Yeah, and I think doing it, I prefer, obviously, now I'm going to kind of contradict myself. I prefer doing it in those ranges. So like MVS is a guy I was comfortable taking a stand on because he's a 9th, 10th round pick for the longest time, maybe even deeper. He's kind of, definitely not the same archetype, but like Rachaad White, it was like I would get to the 9th round and it was like, okay, this is MVS. I'm taking MVS. And now I'm like, okay, let's make sure he makes sense on this team, pushing him a little bit further. Obviously, I took a stand on Gabe. That's also a little bit for the bit equity. Every time somebody tweets that Gabe is priced at his ceiling, I draft him again. So that's
you just do it on command. I'm gonna tweet it out later.
You were asking when do you get in drafts? Well, it's every time I see on Twitter. I'm doom scrolling Twitter for anti-Gabe Davis tweets, and then I go.
You're like, oh, come on, man! I'm behind on my draft. Someone fucking tweet.
Yeah, exactly. But it's the same thing as your approach to Rachaad White. So you have AJ Brown pulled up here. I want to see. AJ Brown is a stand and Rachaad White is a stand. Can you go to your add Rachaad? I want to see what the Rachaad and AJ Brown teams look like.
Oh, they have a lot of McKinnon. McKinnon has also been a stand.
I like it.
He's one that I was like getting pretty nervous about, and then now I'm not nervous about it. I'm like, okay, we're back in. He's getting all the third down work. McKinnon is one of the weirdest ADPs. There's a couple that So let's talk about McKinnon first, because then I want to talk about Tyler Higbee.
Jesus.
McKinnon, everything that's happened for him has been good this offseason. Rojo is more of a known commodity. He's going to be an early down guy. He's not necessarily stealing work from McKinnon, but he could have. Maybe if you don't like Rojo, you don't think this ever was possible. But, I was thinking of scenarios where maybe Rojo is taking a fair amount of the early down work, and the CEH is actually getting a lot of the receiving work.
Yep.
Instead, CEH has been getting, the goal line stuff. Pacheco looks like he's going to mix in for kind of, between the 20s garbage stuff, and he's the kick returner, so he probably won't have, a huge role. And then McKinnon has been getting the receptions and the passing downs. That's the nut outcome for McKinnon, and his ADP has fallen. Yeah. I don't understand it at all.
No, he's been a guy who I was in also on Rojo at the start of the summer, and had the Chiefs' backfield is just one of the most bizarre situations that I can even really remember for fantasy, because it was at that time. If I were a betting man, I would have said I think McKinnon might get cut.
Yeah. There did look like I was holding my breath. There's a period where I wasn't drafting him. I was holding my breath.
Right, and so I have 7% McKinnon, but I have, to your point and kind of the point of this show, he's a guy I'm reaching a little bit on ADP. Particularly, I draft a lot of zero running back teams. I also think right now is an awesome time to draft zero running back teams, because we're getting a lot of these guys like McKinnon at what I think right. So you can take Rachaad White, you can take Darrell Henderson, you can take Devin Singletary, Jerick McKinnon, and these guys both have crazy upside, and we know they have a defined role for week one. Rachaad White's maybe questionable, but like you said, 15th or 16th round Jerick McKinnon is going to score points for you week one.
Well, that's probably why I have so much McKinnon, to be honest, is because White is not my week one play, but McKinnon is.
Yeah. But he also, as we saw last year, he came on strong at the end of the year. He has no competition, generally speaking. No one thinks CEH is good. Isaiah Pacheco is a 7th round horrible prospect from Rutgers, and Rojo apparently is just not good at football. I don't know. Nobody likes him.
Hey, man, that last preseason game, give him credit.
Yeah, the typical Rojo keeps you hanging. You know, we're
He
hanging
sure
on
does,
to that,
man. He's
we're
kept
hanging
me
on to
hanging
that
for years.
98. They were hanging on to that 98-yard touchdown for a long time. But it's like if McKinnon, and we've been bullish on McKinnon for how long, since he was a rookie and stuff, right? Since he came into the league. Now he's like the dusty veteran that we wrote off, who showed us some of the most upside in this Chiefs backfield last year, and it was at the end of the year on a
Yeah.
playoff run. So they clearly are willing to ride him if everything else goes to shit, basically. And so the paths to him being just a stone cold smash are so clear. It's so clear to me that he could be a total smash. And there's like no law. If he's playing third downs, you can't lose on him.
Yeah, and I know like Pete Overzet, he talks about like doing, kind of like layering the zero running back types of archetypes. And I know you've talked about that as well. I like that concept. I also like the layering, like the timelines. So like McKinnon to me is like, okay, what if McKinnon does just turn to dust? I mean, we were calling him Dead Legs McKinnon 2 years ago. He's 2 years older now. His legs aren't getting any younger. So, he might just be like a 5, 6, 7 week type of dude, and then he just completely goes away.
Yeah.
But with a Rachaad White, that's like the Rachaad White's supposed to be coming on as the season progresses, as a rookie. And maybe he doesn't have any third downs to begin the year, but they start trusting him a little bit more, and he's building up that role. So I think about that with the wide receivers as well. Like if I have, you can see that I've drafted a lot of Sky Moore and Treylon Burks. I sometimes will go and get like a gross, like AJ Green type of guy, or just kind of like a veteran, like a Jarvis Landry. You can tell I've been hanging out with Ben. That's like the type of dude who he's on 5 of these white brown teams. I'll try to get a guy like that just to like help get me some early season points because I've drafted, maybe 2 of the rookies already.
Right. I do like that. That's definitely one of my big focuses, and probably a little bit of a weakness that I have, because I generally just like all the same types of archetypes, right? Rachaad White is an archetype that I just generally gravitate to, and I think is the league winning type and tournament winning type archetype. And so sometimes you'll get into a draft and we're all human and we just keep clicking buttons and you're like, oh, yep, so-and-so's there at this pick. I like him. Maybe he's past ADP or something. And the next thing you drafted a 0 running back team with 6 Rachaad Whites. And even if it gets there, late in the season with some of those guys, you may not have even advanced that team. To that point, I think I will say the one thing I learned last year is don't be forcing the low upside, like early season guys, particularly at running back. Right? We would do JD McKissick, and we would do. I think Nyheim Hines is different this year than he was last year, but we would do Nyheim Hines on these teams, and it was like, are his 3 or 4 points in half-point PPR really helping you? So, like, you'll see my exposures. Like, there's not J.D. McKissick on there. There wasn't James White. I wasn't taking James White. Even I know Ty Montgomery's funny because he's a wide receiver on Underdog. But like, even when he kind of looked like he might be the third down back, like I'm not taking him. I know Sean likes Amir Abdullah. I don't really like Amir Abdullah on Underdog. There's other backs. There's other backs I like back there, and so I don't need to take those guys. But it would be more like Devin Singletary, Rashad Penny. I'm trying to think of guys like that. Melvin Gordon,
Antonio Gibson.
Antonio Gibson became a guy who I was taking when he was getting into the hundreds. I was taking him like crazy because I don't know if the upside is there like we hoped about for last year, but certainly a role was he's gonna score points. So layering that kind of thing as opposed to, I think people will be like, oh well, I'll just take James White is the guy. I know he's retired. I'll put James White on this team because I need the early season points, and I think there's other ways we can do it.
And looking at Liam's team last year, like his the final part of his roster, I think it was 5 of his last 6 picks, all had a week that contributed from week 15 through 17. So he missed on De'Ami Brown, which I think I'm responsible for. And then otherwise,
trying to figure out who did De'Ami Brown.
But literally, I did De'Ami Brown, so I'm sorry. I don't think anyone else is on that. But like every single other guy crushed. Like obviously he had Amon-Ra, but I think he also had I'm forgetting all the people now, but like every single dude like that came through with a week at some point that helped him in the playoffs. And so that I generally am trying to think through like, okay, who can deliver me a spike week that'll help me get through the playoffs. To that point, I've started doing more 3 tight end builds because when you get to when you get to rounds 17 and 18, there's only running backs left. But I would say before that, the wide receivers have started to get a little bit gross, maybe in like 15, 16. And there's still some pretty solid tight ends. So I'm thinking like, okay, I need like 1 week 15 spike week. What's going to hit my lineup more easily than a tight end? The bar is so low. So if I just get a dude who can score 2 touchdowns, who has like likely to have a full-time role in this offense, and happen to catch that week, then this gets me through a playoff week. And I don't know. I think tight ends were a little undervalued in ADP this year, just in general. And so I've been building. You can see here on these builds, I've got 2.583 and 2.673 is my second and third most common builds after 2.682.
I love it, and you've talked about this a little bit too. It's you talked about I can't remember what show it was on that, which has also been funny because some other people I know are on him, but that someone like a Pat Freiermuth is like an easy, like one of the easiest fades in best ball. And say whatever you want about Pat Freiermuth, but he's the name that sticks out to me. That's just in this middle tier of tight end, where if I'm gonna pay up that price for one of those guys, at least give me like Goddard or Hawkinson. Like
Goddard, especially. I'm not a big Hawk guy, but Goddard I love.
But that tier, right? I really like Goddard. Yeah, I don't draft him a lot of TJ Hawkinson, but or give me one of the guys who I know has clear, proven superstar elite tight end production, the top 5 basically. If I'm gonna dip my toes into this Zach Ertz, Pat Freiermuth, Irv Smith range, what is just wait and get 3 late guys that or multiple.
And who would you
guys.
say are good targets in that range?
In the late range, not fucking
like an every
Higbee.
down player for a good offense, maybe.
Not fucking Tyler Higbee. No, I'm kidding. I don't dislike Tyler Higbee, but I was rotating through what I would do a lot with the late round tight end stuff. I'm curious what you're doing. Is someone like a Higbee? I was doing it with Fant more frequently. I've backed off the Fant stuff since. Now, I mean, a part-time tight end on the Seattle Seahawks doesn't sound.
Leave it to Pete Carroll to trade away his franchise quarterback for Noah Fant, and then be like, and now you'll be splitting time with Will.
God, just absolutely miserable. So I backed a little bit off of him, but it was like that guy is kind of the layering that you were talking about, like at running back. I'm like, I can get Fant, Higbee, Hunter Henry. Like guys that were
another guy more to splitting time though.
Yeah, I know. I've clearly established the guys to not draft anymore moving forward in this tier. But then I would mix in the Trey McBride's.
Yeah,
Dulcich
I'm taking McBride.
Dulcich before he got hurt. I was taking Isaiah Likely. Now that price has gotten out of control. But I was taking Likely, Daniel Bellinger, Jonnu, those guys late, and mixing through some of those guys where it's like they all have the upside, probably more upside than the Irv Smiths and stuff of the world. It's just the early seasons, probably not much from a lot of them, and the floor is like literally nothing. I mean, Isaiah Likely could just not ever play for the Baltimore Ravens, but I think that there's a path to real upside, and so layering my tight ends as well.
Yeah, I need to. So one of the things that's occurring to me in this conversation is I feel like I need to prioritize more Njoku, who I wasn't taking a ton of. He tends to go just before Higbee and Everett. And so I'm often taking a running back in like the 12th and 13th. And so I don't tend to think about, Njoku. But from a who's going to help me advance through week 15, 16 perspective, he's as good a bet as anybody. So I feel like he'll be a priority. I've been getting a little bit grosser at tight end than even the guys you mentioned, I think, because I'll take Austin Hooper and stuff.
Oh, Jesus.
It's just like he's going to be out there and maybe he catches touchdowns. But now I'm starting to think, like, should I be taking Logan Thomas Like if I'm is a third tight end, because he's going to be out there, right? By the time we get to 15, 16, 17, he'll be probably in an every route role.
Yes.
And he's completely free. You could tack him on the 18th of every draft. And then Trey McBride, I took him today on a Kyler team. I feel like he should be the one skyrocketing up with Ertz dealing with a hamstring.
Yeah, I totally agree. I really don't know why he goes where he goes when
he usually doesn't
get drafted. Yeah, and
yeah.
That sometimes happens on DraftKings in 20 rounds. That he won't go. It's very, very bizarre. I don't really get. Maybe I'm just missing something with Trey McBride and the Arizona Cardinals, which is very possible. I miss on plenty of stuff. I mean, I drafted Trey Lance. I drafted a backup quarterback in the 7th round last year.
Yeah, did you notice that Trey Lance was my highest owned quarterback on these beautiful AJ Brown, Rachaad White teams?
Yeah, that is beautiful. That's how you draft. AJ Brown, Rachaad White, Trey Lance. I mean, where are you? That just print the money right away.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong? But I love this late round tight end type of thing. It's another thing. I'm trying to do this a little bit more. But I was mentioning like kind of barbelling tight end, if you will. Like if and I'm actually not drafting a ton of Kittle and Waller. I might try to scoop some Waller now, just because he really fell very far. Yeah. But it was like, for me, it was like almost just like Kyle Pitts or bust. It's like if I'm not getting Kyle Pitts in the 3rd round, I'm gonna do this late round tight end thing because the market's gotten pretty smart from all those mid rounds. Like you said, once I get to like 15, 16, 17, the best guys are tight ends usually, or maybe even a quarterback. And so I kind of want to be done at running back, or mostly done at running back and wide receiver by that point. So that's turning into this barbell tight end thing, which in turn, we're talking through exposures, is like my Kyle Pitts exposure probably isn't going to go down. It might stay the same, but it's probably not going to go down. But my late round tight end. So like I'm open to Higbee. I mean, it's funny you mentioned Njoku, and so Higbee's on one of my Njoku teams, but these would be 2 guys I do want to bump up. Higbee. Yeah. I only have 5% Njoku. I don't know what I have on Higbee, but kind of the same general thesis. But it's because I was it's just 7% Higbee.
7%. Okay.
We're about
You're
right
kind
at market.
Of in.
I never should have searched this. I'm not
in on market. I'm way above market.
Yeah, shocker. But you can talk. I've heard you talk a little bit about Higbee, and I do think it's totally reasonable. And
look, I'm riding high after my Zach Ertz call last year. I think every gross tight end I touch turns to gold in my mind. So,
hey, I mean, at least this guy. How old is Tyler Higbee? At least
he's 30.
Higbee, is he 30?
Yeah, no, he's 30. He's old.
Okay, never mind.
Or he turns 30. If he's not 30, he'll be 30 soon.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. But I mean, I can get behind Tyler Higbee, I think. What about structures for the rest of the way? What have you been doing generally up to this point from a structure perspective? I can put yours back up here if you wanted to show it. And then what about the rest of the way are you thinking from a team structure perspective? Lots of elite quarterbacks and elite tight ends.
Lots of elite quarterbacks and elite tight ends. I really feel like that's an edge. Although the elite quarterback stuff scares me a little bit because ADP has been so good. Rich Rebar's talked about this and written about it, where we've just kind of like dialed in over the last couple years on quarterback ADP, and like looking at that, it's like we were just like Matthew Stafford's going to be a smash, and he was, but like that was we're doing it again with Kirk Cousins, we're doing it again with Derek Carr. Yep. So like those are the ones that make me nervous. It's like we've just decided who's going to have really efficient passing seasons, and we've actually been really right about that recently, but we've never been good at that historically. So that scares me. Also, maybe we just drafted a backup quarterback in the 7th round for most of the summer, so that could be
2 years
in a row. We've drafted a backup quarterback with reckless abandon. I don't know what's wrong with us, but we just love doing that. So that could definitely backfire in a big way. But there's stuff like Kyler Murray goes in the 6th round now for some reason that no one can explain. So that makes it hard not to take elite quarterbacks. And I like obviously the guys that everybody likes. So, and I think it's like those guys they can do everything, and they're so efficient, and a lot of them are in high volume passing offenses that are really pushing it and are operating in ways that we're not used to seeing NFL teams kind of be bold enough to operate like. So I think there's a lot of reasons in general to be in on most of the elite quarterbacks. And then elite tight end has been such an advantage. And I also, one thing I'm doing is I will, if I have a Pitts or an Andrews or, any of the top 5, I will tack on. Let me pull up my Pitts teams. Because I will tack on 3. So
Okay.
I've only done it on 10% here. Well, I guess 15%. If I do Andrews, let me see Andrews. I'll go ahead and tack on too late with some of these. Yeah, so here on 18% of my Andrews teams are 2, 6, 7, 3.
Interesting.
I'll do that because the play is I get Andrews to week 17. And it's kind of like what Herzig has talked about, maybe if you like experiment with like throwing a handcuff on, you can get like a low end running back. I'm thinking about that with the tight end, where if I know that I want to target that pocketed tight ends in like 14 through 16, where I don't love a lot of the other positions. I do not like, I kind of like the running backs around like 17, 18, like it's just pure flyers, but I don't generally like them in 15, 16.
Yep.
So tight ends are kind of jumping out to me in that range anyway. So if I go like Andrews and then Everett Higbee, that's something I've done a fair amount of, or just elite tight end and those 2 guys, or I'll throw on like a Hurst or whatever. Just it's you don't gotta love the guy, but it's just like this guy could score 2 touchdowns in a week I need. So that's something I've definitely been doing a little bit more of, even with the elite tight end, which I obviously love. The elite tight end strategies you can see.
Definitely tight end is, I think, probably the best place to do that. I mean, tight end and running back. The 2 highest leverage positions are tight end and running back. Tight end because it's a onesie and the scoring is, wild and unpredictable, and there's very few high scorers. So when you do get that, like you mentioned, you get that random 2 touchdown from Hayden Hurst, right? Last year, CJ Uzoma has that random two touchdown game. It's so impactful at that position because even Kelsey, Pitts, Andrews, and so why was Andrews 70% in the final last year? Because he's the only tight end putting up 15 plus half point PPR. Like even Travis Kelsey's having 3 fantasy point games. That's just the nature of the position, and so it has grown on me. I'm still very stubborn in my tight end thing. Also, I have an unhealthy level of confidence in Kyle Pitts, so I take a lot of him and I just ride it out with the 2 tight ends. But I think it's kind of the same thing as like running back. I take a lot more quantity of running back this year. I think that was a mistake I learned from last year.
I'm doing that too.
I have lots of 7 running back teams that. Yep. Last year, I don't know if I drafted a 7 running back team, and I think it was a huge hole in my game. And so I think the tight end thing could be similar, but at these high leverage positions, when you are either barbelling it, right, with a hero running back team, like an elite tight end and then a late tight end, or, going with a late round approach to that position, 0 running back or late round tight end, like I was stubborn in like, I need my 2.592 or whatever, I need to do that, as opposed to being like, no, dude, your RB1 is Devin Singletary. Draft 7 of them, because you'll get that effect. You'll get that natural layering effect and the effect that you were talking about. Like, how do I get Alexander Madison through to the final when maybe he was a bust, but that week is when Dalvin's out, right? Maybe they suck. The playoffs are over. Well, I need all these running backs. It can't just be because I had 3 good ones. I need the 7, right? How do I get Mark Andrews through to the final? It's maybe I luck box that Hayden Hurst 2 touchdown week. So those are just little minor tweaks I've made that I'm really smashing those the rest of the way too.
I feel like I've done a lot more 6 running back builds on hero builds as well, which those to me were always 5. But now I'm like, you know what? Let me push it with a running back 2, which I like doing anyway. But now, I can afford 6 here, and like especially the wide receivers have really dried up by the end. So what am I going to tack on some random wide receiver, or get the position where I actually could use the points more?
Wide receivers really bad right at the end. That's like that's like you said. I like the late round tight end thing. I've been taking a good clip of Marcus Mariota. he's like one of my flavors of the week now, where the market is so sure he's not going to play enough games because the Falcons are so bad that this dude is 100% like a top 15 fantasy tight end with the way he runs. And I think Kyle Pitts, Drake London, CPAT, et cetera, is good enough to make him a fantasy relevant quarterback. And we just don't get rushing QBs like that late in drafts anymore. And so I would bet on him only starting 8 or something games. But like, what if they beat the Saints? What if they win a couple? All you got to do is be like 2 games under 500 through 10 weeks, and you're in the playoff hunt with so many playoff teams. So
yeah, I've been a coward with Mariota. I think it's probably a good play. I haven't done it, but I
do you
should probably
Ritter
do it.
at all? Do you do Ritter?
No,
because
I think Ritter sucks. I think Ritter I just think he completely sucks. And Kevin Cole's been talking about his numbers under pressure during the preseason. They have cratered when he's gotten pressured, which was the red flag on him, is that he has been horrible when pressured in college. And that has translated to the preseason, even though I think people have been generally pleased with how he's looked. Mm-hmm. But that is not going to endear him to Arthur Smith if he's bad under pressure. So I think maybe you have an out with Mariota of him getting benched by like week 10, but then coming back in for the end of the season because they get a look at Ritter and they don't like what they see. I think that's like very live.
That's what I call the thing I was hoping for with Sam Darnold last year. Where he came out hot, right? Sam, I mean, you never seen victory laps like my first month of the season Sam Darnold victory laps. He was leading the NFL in rushing touchdowns, and I had to do something to mask the fact that Trey Lance was my highest owned quarterback, and so it was like
so you touted Sam Darnold.
So it was like, you idiots! Sam Darnold. It was just the Jets stink. We knew it. He's got Joe Brady, he's got DJ Moore, whatever. He was like the QB3 or whatever through the first month. And it just felt so fucking good. And then, as expected, Sam Darnold became Sam Darnold. I mean, he turned back in.
He turned back into Sam Darnold. How much DJ Moore do you have?
Oh, good question. He's probably another guy that I need to take more. Now, again, no pun intended, but 11%. So
it looks like I'm 16%.
Maybe a smidge more of DJ Moore. I think I need. He's in that general Gabe range. He goes a little bit before him, and DJ Moore is just a guy who I try to push a little bit, maybe more than I should sometimes. And so I probably have pretty good ADP value on DJ Moore, relatively speaking. Not like he's fallen much or anything, but yeah, I mean about 3 picks or so. I generally get him around pick 36, and he goes at pick 33. So it's nothing special, but the market just doesn't like the Panthers and doesn't really appreciate DJ Moore. So I think I don't get overexposed because I'm willing to push him a little bit more, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I get that. He's someone like I think he could maybe be the guy. Like, guy who's been really good every year of his career, never has had quarterback play. Never. I mean, his quarterback play has been so bad. They had Kyle Allen. Do you guys remember that? Kyle Allen?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, think Cam Newton, it's like Cam Newton, Sam Darnold. We just completely forgot about Kyle Allen because that was so horrific. And
his best quarterback play was Teddy Bridgewater. That's the best quarterback play he's ever had.
I mean, Baker doesn't even have to be good. Baker just has to be, like, not terrible. And it will be a major improvement for DJ Moore. And, I mean, the target competition, Robbie, like, completely fell off last year. He almost can't not rebound a little bit, but, he's not getting in the way. They don't have a tight end who catches passes. Christian McCaffrey is going to get a ton of volume, but like a running back is not limiting wide receiver volume. That's not how
he's
that
probably
works.
Helping because he's extending drives. And, he's very helpful because he's catching he's catching the ISO route against the linebacker and getting 8 yards or whatever when nobody else is open.
Yeah, he's moving the chains and everything. So it's I don't know. He's someone that definitely I thought he would be priced up. Now, obviously, I don't have as big as, like, I'm talking a big game. I'm at 16%. I feel like I need to get a little bit more. But, yeah, I thought he might move up to, like, the closer to the 2-3 turn. And he never did. Like, I thought I might have to be, like, Higgins or more. Like, this is tough, man. I've never had to make that decision.
No.
So I just feel like I don't know why the market hasn't maybe been a little bit more excited about him having competent quarterback play for the first time ever.
I agree. I don't know what it is. Actually, I think I do know what it is. The market loves either or the shiny new toy or the guy who has been good before. Like at a really high level.
At a really high level. Yeah.
The name, right? JuJu was what, the wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 once upon a time, right? You've said multiple times that it was almost a half.
Well, he
half
wasn't even
ago.
because he was playing with Antonio Brown. So
AB.
I forget how he finished. I think he finished 5th in yards, 4th in receptions.
But so he was obviously a superstar,
Yeah.
for fantasy for a year when he was
and
very
he was like the
young.
dynasty wide receiver 1. Like we were very excited.
Right, he was. I'm not saying he was this good, but like that's kind of how we view like Chase and Jefferson right now,
For
right?
sure.
Like JuJu would have gone in that range if we were drafting in that environment, back or this environment back then. So anyway, but you have JuJu, who everybody's, and then he goes on the Chiefs, and it's like, oh my god, remember how good JuJu was once? So everybody feels comfortable taking him in that tier. Allen Robinson, I can't get over this Allen Robinson shit. Everybody is obsessed with this dude. Who
I might be wrong, and I'm willing to be wrong.
It's kind of the same thing you mentioned with JuJu, that I would be willing to take A-Rob swings if there was a little bit more paths to like actual like superstardom. Like if he was 3 years ago Allen Robinson on the Chiefs, like if the roles reversed, I would get it for JuJu. Like if he was on the Chiefs, whatever. But I don't really see paths to being like, yep, Allen Robinson was the guy you need. Like, how can Allen Robinson be this year's Cooper Kupp when he's on the team
with
Cooper Kupp? You know what I mean? It's like almost that simple. Like, that's who I want in that tier. I want Cooper Kupp or Jamar Chase. He plays with Cooper Kupp, so I don't know how he can be that guy. But people love him, right? It's Allen Robinson, and now he's on the Rams.
Well, so let me defend Allen Robinson here, and this is purely a devil's advocate take, but okay, Mr. Gabe Davis, you're taking a wide receiver 2, talking about how he can be the guy you need, and you can't take a wide receiver 2 on the Rams. Are the Rams that much worse of an offense? Defend yourself.
No, and that's the argument that is hardest to debunk when you talk about Gabe. But it is obviously an age breakout type thing. A-Rob has broken out 10 years ago or 8 years ago or whatever it was. If anything, when I'm betting probabilities on these types of players, the 23-year-old who has earned his way onto 100% of snaps on the best offense, or at least like the highest pass rate offense in the NFL, is an archetype I would be willing to lose on. Allen Robinson is the archetype I do not want to, like, I think I started writing something. This is another thing that I need to finish, but calling it the Richard Seymour strategy of basketball. Remember when the Patriots traded Richard Seymour when he was like, for a first round pick, or maybe even like multiple.
Yeah.
He to the Raiders. And everybody was like, this was in the peak of the Patriots, dominating every year with Brady, whatever. Richard Seymour was like the best defensive lineman in the NFL. First team all pro, whatever, and they trade him in his prime. But he was like 28 or something like that, maybe 29. He was still good the next year, but then gone, like out of the league in like a couple years. That's how I generally view best ball, and I think that's where I differ from other people, right? Why do I like Javonte Williams? Why do I like Gabe Davis? And why do I not necessarily like Leonard Fournette, James Conner, and Allen Robinson? It's because I'm willing to accept that they might beat me because I see all the perks, right? This is Allen Robinson. He could still be really good, and now he's on the Rams. James Conner, obviously, I saw he was on my best ball team. I know how good he was last year. Same thing with Fournette, but I want to find I want to find the new Justin Jefferson. I want to find the new Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, or whatever, and I'm willing to take swings on the archetypes I think best fit that, and I'm comfortable missing. Like being comfortable missing and being too early on guys on both ends of the spectrum is kind of where I come from.
So I thought you were going to go with the Richard Seymour analogy because I think this is sort of how I draft. Is I kind of do the Jamie Collins strategy.
Oh, okay.
So he's on the Patriots. I believe they traded him to the Browns.
Yes.
I forget, right? So 27 he moves to the Browns, I think in season. And then he comes back to the Patriots at 30 years old. Records 81 tackles for him. He's it didn't work out. he comes back, and you get a little more juice out of him. That's kind of like where I'm like, once you're in the 18th round and you're Julio Jones, I'm interested again. Oh, you're free? You're free now? So, yeah, to me, it's like, where's the prices on an Allen Robinson? Because if you're paying more for Allen Robinson this year than people were for Robert Woods last year, when we know that Cooper Kupp is an absolute superstar, when we weren't sure before.
Yes.
It was like Robert Woods or Cooper Kupp. Which one is it? There was uncertainty that you got to benefit from there. You don't get to benefit from that uncertainty in the same way as Allen Robinson. You also have uncertainty that's bad. Like, do they sign Odell Beckham at the end of the year? That totally ruins your week 15 through 17 juice for Allen Robinson. So there's lots of like reasons why I think that, you know, that's not a super appealing pick for the price. But if Allen Robinson was going in the 13th round, because people were like, oh, he's dust last year, I'd be smashing. So, yeah, to me, it's like I want to scoop the free guys. That's, to me, where Higbee, like, all I hear from Higbee as pushback is he's bad. And I'm like, I know. I'm aware. He's also available in the 14th and 15th round. He plays every snap for the Rams. Even Gerald Everett, who I like, I'm not sure he has an every snap role. Higbee does. Higbee, they do not have another option. He's going to be out there all the time. Yep. And it's like the same, it's like, oh, he might catch a lot of touchdowns. Like, that's the same argument for Allen Robinson, but I'm getting him for free. And you guys are, you know, you're passing on a boy Gabe.
Yeah, I actually love, that's a really great, I hadn't thought about Allen Robinson through that lens with the Higbee thing, probably because Tyler Higbee doesn't make his way into my brain very often. Spoiler. But it does make sense. But it is very true. It's like Allen Robinson's name brand has pushed him up into this 4th, 5th round or whatever, when in reality, like, he could be just bad. And like you said, that's what you get with Tyler Higbee, but at a position where it does, I don't really give a shit if he's bad, right? I draft Hayden Hurst.
Everybody's bad.
Hayden Hurst sucks. Evan Ingram sucks. Like,
Irv Smith sucks. Have we ever seen any? The whole argument for Irv Smith is that he was once young. That's the bull case for Irv Smith. He was once young. He's never done anything.
JuJu of tight ends, except never having had the JuJu.
He never did. Yeah, you're supposed to have the good year. When did that happen?
When he came out, he was young.
He was young. He was young when he entered the NFL like 5 years ago.
He was worse than 32-year-old Kyle Rudolph and Tyler Conklin. He couldn't, he's worse than those guys.
Look, I mean, if he flipped with Higbee, I'd be hammering Irv Smith, because it's like, I believe he's got an every down role, and I think the offense could be good. So yeah, it's just like, hey, give me the cheapest guys who have an every down role and are bad, because guess what? The guys you're drafting are bad too. Is Hawkinson good? I'm not sure. Like, is Zach Ertz good? Definitely not. Is Dawson Knox good? Definitely not. Like, those guys are just, Ertz is probably not even an every down guy, but Knox, the whole play is he's an every down tight end on the Bills. But that's a big premium from Bills to Rams compared to Higbee in my mind.
Definitely. I'm trying to see if I can get this. Here we go. So here's my tight end, just general tight end exposure. So you can kind of see, I'm pretty much with you. I got the Alberto bags.
Oh, you got the Alberto bags.
We didn't bring Alberto up, but he was a fun one to. I got very scared, like I think most people did there for that little stretch. But then the market hadn't really totally bought back after the Dulcich IR.
I'm at 6%, which is kind of funny. So I feel like I can get back up to even here pretty easily.
You definitely can easily. He's a guy that I'm willing to target moving forward. Here, Everett, I do like. I was also a little bit worried about Everett before Parham got hurt, because there was not a. Now Everett's getting hype from some of his teammates and stuff. I think it was just today or yesterday, but before that, the early reports were that Parham looked better than Everett did. Yeah. And so I was like, oh God, it felt like Fant. It felt like how I feel about Fant now. Now I don't have those concerns, so I'm still willing to take Everett. Hurst I have the same. Hurst was probably my Higbee, basically. So I was doing the same thing. So who am I to fucking make fun of Higbee when I got 11% Hayden Hurst?
Hurst,
oh my God,
who's so bad he was literally a backup last year, dude. I mean,
hey, he was once a first round pick. You're forgetting he was once a first round pick. While we're doing the Irv Smith thing, he was an old first round pick, but he was once a first round pick. Hayden Hurst.
let's do the Hayden Hurst bull case, because I actually think there's a real, like, it's not real, but there's a half bit bull case. I'm at 11% too. We're Hayden Hurst brothers.
Look at us.
Okay.
Look at us.
Now, the conventional narrative on Hurst is that he stinks because he's never played very well, and he's now on his third NFL team, and he's been a backup twice. but
isn't this the bull?
I'm getting to it. But think about the fact that this guy, he gets drafted by the Ravens, who take Mark Andrews in the same draft. Talk about shit luck. I mean, this is a team that's going to feature the tight end in a huge way in the coming years, and yet he can't get on the field because Andrews is just that good. Okay, that's fine. He goes and replaces Austin Hooper, the jaggiest jag, and he goes into Atlanta. He's going to be their starting tight end. It's all looking okay. He kind of he has a whatever season. Nothing terrible. wasn't embarrassing. Then they draft Kyle Pitts. Pitts.
Yeah. He probably got cucked by the two best tight ends in the NFL.
Yeah.
At least receiving tight.
Back to back. Unbelievable luck. So now, okay, sure. Until they draft, I don't know the name of this would be funny if I knew the next great tight end prospect. But until the Bengals draft him next year, he can have a little run here.
Now I gotta know who's the best tight end in college football in 2022. Oh, Brock Bowers. I don't know if he's tight end eligible, or Michael Mayer from Notre Dame. I do actually know those names, and they are. Brock Bowers is a bad dude. I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if he's draft eligible, but honestly, other than the intro, which made him sound like he's a CFL level talent.
Well, that's why he's going in 17th round.
Yeah, but again, this tight end thing, I know we've talked about the tight end stuff a lot, but I do think it's actually been one of the biggest kind of like light bulb aha moments I've had of this entire draft season. We're looking for ways to kind of leverage the field or ways our opponents are drafting that might be wrong, right? We can do we do the player takes, right? I'm taking this stand on Gabe Davis mostly because I want to dunk on people. Like, we're doing all these different, these different approaches to drafts, generally with players and structure and all of that. But like thinking about how we could be totally wrong about like a position as a whole is like fascinating to me, because that's where like the real, like, you just lap everybody. If like you take 3 late round tight ends, like Higbee, Everett, Hurst, whatever, and those guys just like outscore all of the early tight ends, as a collective, obviously, even if they match Travis Kelce, right? They match Kyle Pitts, and you just spent your 16th, 17th, and 18th round picks on them, and you're matching everybody at this onesie position, and you're beating everybody at the other 3 positions. You just unlock the skeleton key through one little thing, which is, as we've talked about here for probably half the show, is like one of the most evident things ever. It's the only position with Tyler Higbee's running every route and playing every snap. Where do I get that? Someone point me in the direction of a guy at another position that I can find that in the 16th round or whatever.
But also like tight end. So this is to your point of like taking the 3 guys. You can definitely do that. But what if you take Kyle Pitts and then tack on 2 of those guys? Because like, okay, this is Darren Waller's game log from 2020. I'm picking 3 weeks, not completely at random, but he goes. So there's a 4-week stretch. 5.2 points. 18.3, these are half PPR points. 4.3, so complete dud in 2 of these 3 weeks. So you could see, 4.3 in the championship week or whatever. You can easily outscore that. But what if that 4.3 was week 16? What if that's, all of the Waller teams washing out? He scored 38.5 points the following week. So to me, it's like even, and that was in 2020, the season when, following that, we were drafting Waller super high. That was his good year. So I think in a good Pitt season, we could be looking at some pretty wild swings in his game log. We generally do see that at tight end. So if you can just get a guy through, I think that's a pretty interesting way to play the position, because we know, like, if Pitts has 30 points in week 17, if Kelce does, if Andrews, there's only 5 or 6, maybe 7 guys in the whole league who can have like a 30-point week at tight end in week 17. getting that guy there, if he's had a dud, would be even better for you. Like, you prefer that he dud in week 15 and 16, and you get through, because now you're facing less teams. You actually have leverage on the field with that tight end.
I love this, and Kittle's always the guy that comes to my mind when I think about that exact thing. The Waller example was obviously still very good. Kelsey is a little bit of has been. I'm not saying he will be high floor and high ceiling, and that's what I'm hoping for from Pitts, right? And that's what Andrews was down the stretch. But those are one example a year that we've gotten at tight end, and it doesn't always have to be the case. Those guys could be the wild swings, like you mentioned. But like, think about George Kittle, right? These are George Kittle's game logs. This is from last year. The reason why George Kittle is drafted as an elite tight end is not because you're getting this 14 points a game every single week baked in floor, right? It goes from 4 for 78, 4 for 17, 7 for 92, 4 for 40, and then 6 for 101 and 1, right? Then you move on down to a couple games in a row, 9 for 181 and 2 from your tight end. Like you said, we can't guess the timing, but then look, 2 for 21, 1 for 29. He went 1 for 13 before he went 9 for 181 and 2. So if this was instead of week 12 and week 13, right, this was week 16 and week 17, but your week 16 was the Hayden Hurst 6 for 60 and 2 game that gets you out of that week 16, and then you have George Kittle and goes 9 for 181 and 2, and you're one of 6 people that have George Kittle in the final. Like, that's how you win $2 million. It's a very micro example, but I think tight end is this is part of why, like I mentioned with the zero running back stuff, is like when I have 7 of these running backs, like that's part of the power. It's not just all the things that we talk about all the time with zero running back and such. It's how do I like, layer all this together and get leverage in the final.
It's also the ADP environment where, look, I mean, if everyone thought like, oh, you got to get 3 tight ends to try to get your tight end through, and the last
definitely
acceptable tight end was gone by the end of round 14, I would exclusively be doing 2 tight end builds. Like, I would never be tacking on a third, but that's not the case. Like, wide receivers we talked about dries up in a big way. It feels like more than last year to me. There's some running backs around, but the tight ends, there's some really viable guys. Even 18th round guys like Trey McBride. I mean, we just saw Pat Freiermuth be valuable down the stretch.
Yeah.
It's like, man, I want to bet against Zach Ertz. I think he might be dust. Everyone thought he was dust last year, and then he lands on the Cardinals, and all of a sudden he's not dust. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's an ADP environment that supports this right now, and maybe next year there isn't.
Yep, I love that. That's really, honestly, we talked a little bit about it. That's kind of the thesis, right? Is we're looking for these things in the market that could be advantages, and it's not even like player take. We talked about like 10 different tight ends or more that are available back there. Pick your guy or cycle through them all or whatever. But it's this weird. Everybody's pushed up wide receivers, and then you reach this point of the off season. When we're drafting in May, there were all these running backs because we could pipe dream about everybody, right? Mm-hmm. We could pipe dream about Keontae Ingram on the Cardinals, and it's like all those guys are gone now. They're not draftable, generally speaking. So running back dries up, right? I really like Zamir White now, but he used to be a 17th round pick.
I can't talk anyone into him. Thank you.
I took him in every dynasty league, and he's a smash in dynasty when Josh Jacobs is gone next year. But I keep drafting Zamir White because he might just be the guy. I don't know why. I really don't know why we're doing this thing with Josh Jacobs falling, but Zamir White nobody wants to take. Anyway,
I don't get it.
But he's like a 13th or 14th round pick now, right? As opposed to a 17th or 18th round. So who do I take in the 17th to 18th round? Well, we didn't talk a ton about quarterbacks, but I think there's quarterbacks there and there's tight ends there. And then that's when we start to figure out how to leverage the field. All right, we talked a ton about a lot of different stuff. And went much longer. That tends to happen. Much longer. This is like the ship chasing marathon episodes where we're like, yeah, let's do a draft, and then it's 2:30 in the morning, and we're still.
Should we rip another one? Let's rip another.
Yeah, exactly. And then Leone's out for runs, and it just devolves into chaos. But you mentioned you wrote or are writing the walkthrough.
It's out right now.
It's out right now. Definitely must read stuff. And then you've also obviously finished up your legendary running back articles, which are also must read stuff. But what else? Anything else coming up?
Yeah, that's it. If you're drafting, read the legendary running back article. If you're whenever, I'm sure you're not done drafting, but whenever you are, and you want to start thinking about some week 1 stuff, the walkthrough game by game preview column for week 1 out now. Dive deep into lots of kind of game flow type stuff, pass rate over expected, but also looking at just target share, snap counts. There's a ton of fun nuggets in there. I think you guys will enjoy. Got me pretty excited about watching some actual football.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. I also really enjoy how you do the walkthrough because I'm a little bit of a robot from a DFS perspective. I have the things that I like to do, and obviously I have access to projections and all that kind of stuff. But I always learn something, or not even just learn something, see something through a different lens when I go through. It could be 10 things. It could just be that one thing where I'm like, man. And then you start to apply it to DFS or whatever. You're like, well, that guy's not owned, or that guy's going to be really popular, and maybe you have something, that it just makes me think differently. And that's the kind of content that I like.
Yeah, because there's narrative. Like last year, there's a big narrative last year that the Browns and the Vikings were going to shoot out, and that one of the things that I was proud of in the walkthrough is that that's not how I saw that game at all. Like I was like, these guys are gonna be psyched. Like they're gonna be so psyched. They're gonna be like hugging each other before the game. Like, let's fucking run the ball, man. Like they're gonna be so happy, and they did.
Yep.
So I think that a game like that jumps out to me that's like maybe a little bit less of like a shootout environment could be the Cowboys and the Buccaneers, both dealing with offensive line questions. We just saw them have this massive shootout last year where the Cowboys went super pass heavy. Yeah. And I think it could maybe flip. The siren does not want this information out here. They're coming for me.
They are. I was just about. Is that Brady? That's or Brady. Goodell. Goodell is like, this is our feature game. Would you please shut the hell up about this? I totally agree. I already bet the under. On that game. I am pretty into that. Before we go, can you sign off on Chiefs Cardinals? The Chiefs are just going to hang a huge number on the Cardinals, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That one's fun. And if you're looking for bringbacks or if you want to play from the Cardinals side, because they're going to get pushed to the air, I do think that one of the things that really hurt the Cardinals offense last year was not just that they lost DeAndre Hopkins, but that they had him in a deep threat role. And when he was out, they replaced him with Antoine Wesley. Didn't work. Shocking. And I think it really hurt the offense to lose that. They have, obviously, Marquise, but they don't have Hopkins, but they have Marquise Brown in that deep threat role. I feel like if the Cardinals are able to hit the ground running again this year, it's probably going to be through Brown. He's going to have that connection, be able to open the offense back up a little bit. So, to me, I wouldn't be messing around with, Kyler stuff that doesn't have Brown. I think if the Cardinals are able to hang with the Chiefs, it's because of that connection.
Love it. Absolutely love it. We're recording this on a Friday, so everybody have a good weekend. We'll be having some more pre-recorded stuff coming out here on the channel, so be on the lookout for that. Obviously, you probably already follow Pat and everything, but we'll see you guys next time.